It was a late August Sunday in Chicago, Illinois. The people of LaSalle Street Church went to church like they did every other Sunday. Now, it's probably not that much different for how we get ready for church that August. You know, maybe some were late because their kids didn't have their clothes on right, or maybe they just woke up a little late after getting home from a vacation, or maybe somebody was waiting for a ride to church and happy to see that person come up in their car. They were going to church and they weren't expecting anything surprising that day. But several hours later, everyone who attended church in that fall or spring or summer 2014 were perplexed, excited, and nervous about what had happened in worship that day. Each of them had been given a check for $500. And a little slip of paper was added in to that envelope, and it said, "Do good in the world." One member of the congregation, Dan, he thought about that $500 for a long time. After a few weeks of reflecting on how to use the check, he decided that he was going to cash it all and the $20 bills, and he was going to walk around his community, and he was going to give that money out, $20 at a time, to people in need. Well, one fall morning in late September, he started walking around his neighborhood. And 2 hours later, he still had that $20 in his pocket. He hadn't been able to give it to anybody. But he came across a little sign on a door. It was a daycare center. And the sign said, "Nap time, 1 to 2:30. Please do not ring the bell. Knock quietly." The middle-aged woman who opened the door upon Dan's gentle knocking had spit up on her shoulder, and her weary ways suggested that she needed a nap just as much as those kids did from 1 to 2:30. Now, Dan shared with her why he had come, and he had his $20 in his hand, and he said, "I thought maybe you might know somebody in need, maybe one of the parents of the children in your daycare." Well, the woman sized him up for a second and said, "Nah, I don't know anybody who needs any money." Determined, Dan continued to hold that $20 bill out, insisting that he didn't want anything in return, that he wasn't selling anything, and that he just wanted the money to do some good for somebody. Now, I want you to pause for a moment and think about that. If somebody in Strasburg was coming around knocking on your door, offering you $20, how many of you would take it? Well, some of you would. Good. You're a little less, I don't know, I'd be a little suspect. I'd be like, why are you trying to give me $20? Is this some sort of con? Right? Maybe you're like me and you'd close the door as fast as you could and say, "I don't want any today," thinking that perhaps they're trying to get something out of me. We know that nothing in life comes for free, right? Not even money. And there's something weird about somebody coming up and telling you that they're going to do something good for you and who doesn't expect anything in return, right? We teach our children not to take candy from strangers, so why would we think it's okay to take free money from somebody who comes up to us, right? You know, our relationship with money and people is complicated. Just think of some of the things that we say about money. Easy come, easy go. The rich get richer, the poor get poorer. Our history and experience in this world reveals to us that when it comes to a transaction, there's always somebody who wins and somebody who loses. At least money. I mean, think about it. You go to the Family Dollar, you buy something, and maybe you're happy with what you got, but then you don't have the money anymore, right? So it's not surprising to me that this woman at the daycare tried to close the door on Dan as soon as he started spouting off some nonsense about wanting to help somebody. You see, I think we allow ourselves to be closed off to generosity. We create space between us around giving and receiving, and especially around money. Many of us have grown up with these beliefs that we have to earn what we get. and that we shouldn't receive handouts, that people who receive something or maybe are greedy or lazy or undeserving. Today we continue our story of Easter, and we heard about how Mary, Peter, and John discovered an empty tomb last week. We've heard how Jesus revealed himself to Mary, and she ran off and told the disciples. And then today we hear that those disciples actually see the Lord themselves in the upper room, all except Thomas. And then a week later, after Thomas says that he won't believe until he puts his hand in the side and sees the nail holes for himself, Jesus appears and Thomas's doubts disappear. Jesus says to him, "Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not yet seen and yet have believed." You see, we live in a world full of doubt, don't we? There are many who doubt that Jesus is who he says he is. There are many who doubt that God exists or that there is anything beyond the years that we live. And we look around at how horrible we can be to one another, and we use that as proof that there is no God. Now, there are some who have tried hard to speak the language of science and math and sociology and psychology to prove that God exists. You know, there have been scientific studies to try to find the weight of the soul. There have been people who have looked at genetics and tried to prove that those of us who go to church are just plain different from everybody else. There are those who use archaeology and textbooks and shovels to find the historical Jesus, trying to prove that everything that the Bible says can be backed up with modern scientific methods. Now, the truth is, I've never been persuaded for or against the belief in God by this evidence. See, I'm not sure that we will ever find a way to draw an accurate picture of what Jesus looked like when he was young. We will never know what he was like when he was a teenager or as a young man in his 20s. And maybe if you're like me, you've realized that there will never be enough proof in this world to win all people to God. We know that some people are going to be persistent in their unbelief. And maybe, just maybe, there are times when you're one who's examined it all, and maybe you're still not convinced that God truly exists. The question that comes up for us who have doubted in the resurrection, who have doubted in Jesus, is the same question that daycare lady had on the Chicago street in late September. And she was thinking this. She says, "Can I really trust what I'm being said by this man at the door?" Now, keep in mind, this man had a $20 bill in her face. And she was ready to close the door on him because she couldn't trust what he had to say. The stakes are so much greater for us than a stranger offering $20 to a tired child care worker. In fact, the gift that we are offered is so much more. You see, we're given the gift of eternity and a gift of healthy relationships and a new kingdom here on earth and in heaven. We are given gift of faith and something beyond ourselves. We are given the gift of a future without tears and without pain and without grief and anger. And as Christians, we are given simple instructions by Jesus. Take this gift and do good in the world. Reverend Laura Truax, the pastor of LaSalle Street Church, and Amelia Campbell, a member who served on the church's leadership committee, wrote a book about their experiment in extreme generosity. In their book, Love, Let Go, Radical Generosity in the Real World, they explained that their church had invested in a property many years ago, a low-income housing project. They had invested with it with 3 other churches, and that housing project had gone defunct, and it had been sold to somebody else, and, well, each of the 4 congregations was going to receive $1.6 million each. Well, the leadership of LaSalle Street Church wrestled with what to do with that great gift, that unexpected money. They knew they had to repair the church. They were an aging congregation in the inner city. And Truax and Campbell explained that a wild idea emerged as they had meeting after meeting of their church council. They said, why not take 10% of that unexpected money and share it? Churches are always asking people for money. Why not give that first 10% to the congregation, $160,000, and say to them, go and do good with that money? What a surprising example of grace and freedom it would show the world. And what if we showed the congregation that we trusted them to do good with gifts that they never sought or expected to receive in the first place? And wouldn't that be the same thing that God does for us when He places the whole world in our hands and He gives us free will to believe or not believe and to do good or not do good? Isn't that the same thing? What if this entire exercise of tithing to the people became a metaphor for what God does for us every single day? We would be pointing to a reality that every one of us has something far more valuable than a $20 bill in our pocket or a $500 check. And that daily we are asked by God to do something good with it. God has given us a gift more valuable than money. God has given us the gift of love, come down in the person of Jesus, born to a poor couple, raised as a carpenter, and who only taught and healed for 3 years before his countrymen asked for him to be put to death. But much more than that, God changed the rules. God raised Jesus from the dead. God defeated the anger and bitterness, and He defeated that system of winners and losers, these rules that we often live by in this world. God revealed to us that we can love and be loved, and that we won't lose anything in doing so. Reverend Truax and Amelia write that after Dan pleaded with the woman at the child care center, she actually kept the door open. He wasn't some crazy guy, right? Even though he probably seemed kind of crazy. She listened to Dan and she leaned in as he repeated his purpose. He only wanted to give the money to someone who could use it. And surely she knew somebody in her household or one of those kids' parents who needed that money. Now she hesitated and she paused, and silence filled the seconds as the door hung open. And finally the woman said to Dan, "Well, can I keep it for myself?" Now, it wasn't the response that Dan expected. And then he kind of challenged it. He said, "Well, are you really the person who needs it the most?" "Well, yes, I believe I am," she said. So Dan leaned in and he gave her that $20. And she blessed him and called him an angel, saying that she never thought she would ever meet an angel. With tears in his eyes, Dan blessed her back and walked home with an empty pocket. Now, I wish I could give you $500 today and tell you to do good in this world. I wish I could give you $20 and tell you to do good in this world. Now, if I had done so, it would certainly get into Facebook, and people would be texting, "Hey, they're giving out free money at the Methodist Church on Sunday. Come to church." May even show up with a daily, right? But I don't have that money. I don't have that gift of money to share with you today. Instead, I just have the instructions that go along with it. Take this gift of Easter and do good in the world. Amen.